Hello everyone, this is Clay with DigiFactors Animation. Hello, how are you? Recently I've been posting some videos of a choose my own adventure game that I'm working on using finger pistols are dangerous, using the app called Movie Zoo for animation. And I'm using 360 camera. Now, I have some, I had some subscribers asking me, how do I do that? How did I do that with the camera and everything? So yeah, I'm going to show you, and I'm going to show you how to do the 360 setup and animate the character riding the buggy and have the camera stay with the buggy, making it look like a first person shooter riding a car. Yeah. So with that said, let me bring up Movie Zoo, and I already have a setup here with a track going around a mountain and a few trees, and I have the buggy with the character in it. And if you notice that when I put the buggy together, I added a little red stick coming out of his head, and the reason of that is to help me keep uh, my camera in the position that I want it. In other words, it's sort of like a marker. So anytime I'm animating an object and having the camera follow it, I want the camera to stay in that one position. I don't want it lagging behind or going ahead of the object or the character in the buggy. So yeah, so anytime you're doing something like this, I would suggest to add a marker somewhere on your model. Okay, so it won't be noticed really because the camera won't be able to see it. You won't even notice it's there. So, and you can see I keep it right there. That is where I need it to be, so I don't get any kind of images from the character itself. So now, with that said, the next thing or the first thing we're going to do is animate the buggy with the character in it. Now, I don't know what version of Movie that you have. You do have another, when you go into object movement, you have this thing where you drag the object around, which is really hard. So hopefully you'll have the keyframe expansion pack installed in the Movie Zoo. So that's what we're going to use. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the buggy with a character in it, and I'm going to go to movement. Okay, and then I'm going to go switch to prepare, and as you can see, the buggy is already in keyframe mode. So I'm going to switch back to direct. Now, uh, let me see. Let me stretch out the timeline a little bit. I don't want it too long because I don't want it going too fast on me. Maybe a little bit, because the longer you have your timeline, the slower the animation will be, and you don't want it being too slow. Okay, you want it to keep it something like maybe like where I have it, like a 200 or something like that. But then again, a lot of you may have an animation that you want it to be slow, or maybe like a slow scene or something like that. So I don't know. But anyway, now when I animate the buggy, I'm not just going to add a keyframe and then move it up, and then another keyframe and then move it further. I'm not going to do that. And you're probably saying, well, if you stretch it out and do it, it's just going to go all over the place. No. The way I'm going to do it is if I'm going to add a keyframe at the beginning of the timeline, and then I'm going to add a keyframe at the end of the timeline. And then once I get that last keyframe in, I'm going to move the character or buggy to the final destination, which will be the last keyframe. Okay, so let's go ahead and add the first keyframe. Now, Here's another thing, and this is important, especially for the camera. If you want the camera to stay right on that marker that you place on the character's head, you have to make sure that you know where the keyframes that you put for the buggy are at. So what I like to do is I like to mark the keyframes with cue points. So I add a cue point to that. Alright. Then I'm going to go to the end of the timeline and then I'm going to add a keyframe and then mark it with a cue point. So now whenever I animate the car, the camera to follow the cart, I know where my keyframes are at. So that way I can put the keyframes for the camera in the same positions of the keyframes for the cart. So now we got our keyframes in the place. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the buggy and I'm going to move it to the opposite side of the track, like so. But I can't keep it facing the same way. All right. Now you want to turn it the way that you're traveling. So if you turn it this way, that will be the correct way. But if you turn it this way, it's just going to make the buggy spin around as it moves around the track. And we don't want that. So we're going to move it or turn it this way. We want it to be facing that way. So now let's make sure that the buggy is on the track, like so. Get it nice and straight. Okay, now we got that. Now here's the next step. We're going to go to where we'll put the buggy right here. So I'm going to move back in the timeline. Right about there. Okay. And I'm going to add a keyframe. And again for that one, for the camera's sake, I'm going to add a cue point to mark where that keyframe is. Now, let's go get the buggy. We'll have to go inside this mountain. And let's drag the buggy over there to that where we want it. Okay, right about here. And then let's straighten it up. About like that. Okay, now we're going to have to go back this way and bring the buggy right about here. So let's move it forward about like that, and then let's add a keyframe and then mark that keyframe with a cue point. And then let's drag that buggy where we need it to be. And I meant for it to be right here. So let's make sure we got it straight. I like that. Now, we need to bring it right here. So move it up. Right about there. Add a keyframe and then mark it with a cue point. Now let's turn it facing the way we need it to be. Right there. Okay. Now, you notice right here, it's not in the center of the track. So what we got to do is we got to back it up to that point to where it is not on the track. Right about like that. So then we add a keyframe. Then mark it with a cue point and we'll move it back onto the track. About like that. So we see the line of our timeline right here. That is the outline of our timeline, and it's pretty much in the center of the track like we need it. But right here, it isn't. So we're going to have to back up again, and where it's right off the track, right about here, and then we're going to add a keyframe and then mark it with a cue point. Now let's bring it to the center of the track. Straighten it up. About like that. There we go. Now let's see. Maybe hmm, let's see what happens if I put a keyframe there. Usually when you put keyframes too close together, that will get a pinch in it, and then the animation wouldn't do right at that point. So that worked pretty good. So let's try that, and let's add a cue point to mark that one. And let's put it right there. Also, another worry is, and the way I'm doing this, is how fast the animation is going to be when I play it. So right now, it looks pretty good the way we want it. So let's back up to the beginning of the timeline. Now let's play that and see how it looks. Well, that looks pretty good. It stayed right on track. Let's play that again. Looks good. I'll keep that. So let's go back to the beginning of the timeline now. And right there. Now it's time to animate the camera. Okay, so let's move that camera up. Okay, put it right there. Well, first let's put the camera into keyframe mode. So go to movement, direct and movement. Okay, and you can see it's already in keyframe mode. So we're going to add a keyframe right at that cue point. Now you see the cue points? You don't see the keyframes for the cart because we're animating the camera now. So that was the purpose of the cue points. These cue points will let me know where to put the keyframes for the camera, and it will help keep up with the cart where I need it to be, right on that marker that I put on the character's head. So let's add a keyframe on that cue point. Now let's adjust the camera. Let's put the camera right there. Let's make sure I got it straight. When you're doing 360 with a camera and you're animating it, it is always important to keep it facing straight ahead, even when it's turning. So you have to turn the camera as it turns around the curve. So it's got to be straight because you're doing a 360. You're going to be doing a 360 camera, and if your 360 is out of line, it's not going to work right for you when you're playing it back or watching it on a VR headset or something like that. So it is vital to do that. I mean, to have that set. Okay. Now that we got the first keyframe, let's go to the last cue point and set our last keyframe to that. Add the keyframe, okay, and then let's grab our camera Okay. And remember, we don't want the camera turned that way. We want to turn it this way. Now let's put that camera on that marker. Let's see. Right about there. Let's make sure I got it straight. Okay, straight. Now let's back up to the next keyframe. I mean a cue point. And let's add a keyframe. And let's grab our camera. Drag it over to the buggy. Place it on that marker. About like so. Okay. Now let's go to the next keyframe. Add a cue point, or let's go to the next cue point and add a keyframe. I'm sorry about that. Okay, and we'll move that camera back onto the marker. Make sure we keep it straight. I like that. Okay, it's not quite straight, so we got to straighten it up. About like that. That looks good. Now, let's back up to the next marker, cue point. Add our keyframe, and then bring the camera to the marker. Okay, and then straighten the camera up. Like so. Okay, now back to the next marker, cue point. Add a keyframe. Straighten. Don't worry about the little wiggly thing, because once we get over here, it will straighten itself up. So, like that. Whoops. And it's also marked for the height that I need it. So I keep the height even with the part of that camera right there. So let's make sure I got it straight. Not quite. And move it right in the center. Okay. Now to the next marker. Add a keyframe. And as you can see, the keyframe that you see here is starting to straighten up. Let's straighten her up like that. Now let's go to the next marker. Add the keyframe. And then move the camera in place. Let's see. Let's make sure we got it straight. That looks good. Now, let's back up to the last or the first keyframe. Now let's go back and look at our track. You can see the outline of the keyframe on the track. It all looks good. Looks pretty much centered on the track itself. Now let's play it back and see how well the camera keeps up with the buggy. So let's play it. See how the camera just follows? It stays right on that marker. And it's just the way we want it. And it looks good. So let's go back to the beginning of the keyframe. The next step is setting our camera up for 360. Okay, so let's close the timeline. We don't need to mess with that anymore. So for the 360 camera, as you can see right now, it's just set on regular camera. So what we have to do is we have to go to Tools, and if you got the 360 expansion pack, so you go to Tools, and you'll see Enable 360 Video. So let's click on that and to enable it. Now you notice that the camera view changed. Now you see the camera is rotating all around. Okay, and then when you keep that camera, that view open, a lot of times, depending on your computer, it will slow things down and make things choppy while you're trying to animate or something like that. So that's why I always do my animation first before I add the 360. But I don't have that problem anyway because my computer is like a monster anyway. It's super fast. So anyway, now that we got that all set, okay, we just don't want to go ahead and render it. Okay, we don't want to just up and render the video and keep it on the settings that you have. Let's just say like um, if you got it on this setting right here and you have it on AVI. Well, when you go render that video in 360, your 360 video will be blurry and pixelated, and you don't want that. So, in order to fix that, you can do it from here, or you can go to let's close that. You can go to the file menu on MovieZoo and go to options. Okay, and on options, you want to set the resolution on the very last one, which is 3840 by 2160. That is the highest one. And we want to keep it on uncompressed. Now, depending on what you have with DirectX, you can use DirectX 9 or 11. I prefer 11 if you have it. And we'll close that out. So those are the settings that you want. Now, when you go to video and make video, you have to change the settings here too. Now, once you change your resolution, it'll automatically be changed here anyway. But it's the format we're worried about. So let's go to advanced. And I don't use AVI. I use MP4. MP4, for some reason, has good quality. Now, for this right here, I don't mess with it. I just leave that alone. Now I'm set up for 360 video. The settings that I've showed you are the best settings for MovieZoo to work in 360. The videos come out perfect. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the video and I'm going to save it on my desktop. So I already have one there, so I'm going to overwrite it. So now that it's rendering, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video and come back when the video itself here is done rendering, and I'll play it back to you to show you what the results are. So I'll be back as soon as the video is done rendering. Okay, everyone, well, welcome back. When I rendered the movie or the video, um, it still seemed a little pixelated and blurry. And the reason why is there was one setting I forgot to mention uh, for you to do. And I'll show you. And we'll go to video. Now, when I when I told you to set your resolution to 3840 by 2160, and then set your output to MP4 video, I forgot to mention the bitrate. So the bitrate you want it all the way to 1986 9. 19869. So set your bitrate all the way to that. And I'm sorry I forgot to mention that before. So I rendered the video the second time and it's perfect. So let me show you what it looks like. And here it is. And the camera is following along just fine. It's staying in one spot. That's because of that marker I added. And if you look down here, you can probably see the marker. But it still looks good. And that's my anyway, that's my method of making a first person 360 video riding a cart or any kind of other vehicle that you have. Just remember when you make your characters, make sure, like your model or something like that, make sure you have that marker on there so you know where to keep your camera at all times when you're animating the camera. Because that's the way I do it. Okay, now, before I say goodnight, there's one other thing you need to know. Okay, now, after you make your 360 video and you want to upload it to YouTube, now YouTube probably won't recognize it as a 360 video. That's because it needs to have the metadata. Okay, now I have this app right here called Spatial Media Metadata Injector. So what this does is this will inject the metadata into your 360 video. So let me double click and I will supply a link to the download of this in the description down below. So let me open this up. Okay, that'll pop up. So go to open, click on your video, open it, and then right here where it says inject metadata. So inject it. And then it'll ask you to save the video all over again. So you can name it whatever you want. So save it. And it's done. So now I have this one and this one injected. So if you happen to play this and your video player or whatever doesn't recognize it as a 360 video, that's because it probably also needs to be either you set it on 360 view or it needs the media tag. But if you got the media tag or media data, I'm sorry, injected right off, your player will recognize it and it'll play. So yeah, that's basically it. So anyway, I hope this video isn't too confusing, and I hope it helps or what it helps you anybody that was trying to do this. So anyway, that's it. I hope y'all enjoyed the video and y'all have